All right, we are live. Welcome, everyone, to the second Leaders on Purpose Fireside Chat. We're so excited to have you joining us today. These fireside chats are a little sneak peek on what we'll be talking about in the Leaders on Purpose Accelerator course, and we're delighted to have Karsten Ottenberg joining us today. I'm Krista Jory, CEO and co-founder of Leaders on Purpose. And I'm joined my co-host today and always.
I'm Nicole Belisle, and I'm the Director of Leadership Capacity and Development at Leaders on Purpose and an Executive Educator at Harvard University. Glad to be here with you all.
Yeah, and joining us is Karsten Ottenberg, and we've been so looking forward to this chat and this discussion. I've known Karsten, we've known each other for a couple of years now, and I'm going to read his background. It's so impressive, and there's no way I could remember it all. So Karsten Ottenberg was the CEO of BHS Home Appliances Group from 2013 to 2019. That is Europe's largest home appliances manufacturer. Before that, he was the CEO of G&D from 2005 to 2013, a leading security technology company for the payment, mobile communications, government, and identifications industries. For the German government IT Summit initiative, which was Angela Merkel's initiative in 2006, to strengthen the IT industry in the country, Karsten served as the chairman of the summit's IT and Health and the IT and Securities chapters between 2006 and 2013. He was also a member of the Cross-Functional and Innovative Consulting Board for the German government between 2009 and 2013. Excuse me. Today, Karsten serves as a non-executive director on the board of John Elkington's Valens and as advisor to university and foundation boards driving transformation towards a regenerative business designs. Karsten is also a member of the Ashoka Support Network, an Endeavor Global Mentor, and an Unreasonable Group Mentor to support the scaling and systems change strategies of global impact for social entrepreneurs. So Karsten, welcome. We are so glad to have you with us.
Thank you, Krista. It's almost shocking what you mentioned all, but it's a full lifetime, and I'm really happy that we are connected, and I'm happy to have this fireside chat that I try to structure interactive with the community. So you've introduced this chat on a pretty broad scale when you wrote out, and I thought about, oh my God, how long do we have? And people who know me know there is always a danger that I take too much time. So I try to think about what kind of frame I'm going to set, and then hopefully we get into interaction, and there's a lot of time that I leave for that. So I think my first input to the discussion would be around 5 topics that I thought of. The first is the question, why is at this point in time transformation inevitable? And I mean that beyond Dilbert. So something really that's serious. Why is it so important? And what drives this transformation that we are currently in? That we relate to the word of purpose transformation and purpose economy, and what makes it different from the transformations that we have labeled in the past decades, or even in history of economics. So what is different and what is special with this purpose transformation? That leads to the concept I briefly mentioned that is core to it, and which gives a bit of a clarity on the terminology. So purpose and what I call and others call the systemic value creation. To clarify what we mean by that, and be very specific about what I think what purpose has to be defined semantically. Because with transformation and with purpose, we see a lot of terminology around, captured also by movements around the topic of transformation and around the topic of purpose, but not at the core. Then a little intro on how business struggle with transformation, and particularly how they struggle with this transformation. That's something I like to address briefly, and then the kind of learnings on what is needed for a successful transformation in the corporate world. What are the learnings from transformations that we have been gone through in the past decades, or even struggling today in getting through? So these 5 topics, I try to briefly give a pitch on each of these 5 dimensions, and then we enter into a level deeper into the questions and answers with the community. So why is transformation inevitable, and what drives this transformation? Is simply, if we are serious and leaning back, we can see that a fundamental concept of economy is changing, and it's changing in an exponential way. What we are seeing is that around business and economy, what is changing is the value assignment, the value that people and stakeholders of economy and of business are assigning to companies. So we see, if we watch the core stakeholders of business, we watch people as consumers, we watch people as employees, we watch investors' behaviors, we watch civil society by legislation, by regulation, and by even court rules. And if we are honest, we get the feeling and clarity that something's unfolding in front of us. This seems to change at an ever faster pace. So typically an exponential development where we as people are not really used to. And we are still in the deception phase, potentially close to break even in this exponential race to a new value definition, and thereby a fundamental transformation of how we do business and how economy is defined and how it links to productive and non-productive sectors. So this exponential development is something that as business we have to understand as something pretty dramatic. Forced exponential developments are overlaying systemically in how every stakeholder around you is valuing you and assigns value to you. This is a very fundamental transformation. And it's different from the transformations we've seen, the last one being the digital transformation following the chip and software revolution of the late 70s of last century. This time, it is not about technology. So all the revolutions that we've seen and the transformations that we've seen in the past millennia, I would say, is around the technological revolution, followed by the way what we do and how we do business. This time, technology is abundant. We are seeing amazing technology developments in an exponential way. So there's not a technology actually underlying this revolution and following the transformation. This time it goes to the fundamentals, which is the definition of the concept of value. Which is, I'm a physicist, so which is like you could change the connotation of energy of a system and then see what happens. So we have a much more fundamental base for the transformation we are currently in and unfolding. And technology is something which is very important and can serve as a very, very powerful tool if combined to create that new kind of economy. John has put that out in the Green Swans, I think, in an excellent way. So therefore, this is very different. And the concept of value is something very strange for us because it integrates, and people have shown that with Kate Raworth and others, we are now talking about a systemic value creation. So value is something combined in a systemic way, the social, the ecologic, and the financial sustainability of our business value creation. And it's also hard to understand that this is not an Excel sheet where you have a bottom right that we all love so in management, say, we just have to add it up in a certain way and we get a simple linear metric and then you can see what your total value is. It's a group of systemic interference of these three social, ecologic, and economic things. And this leads to the definition of purpose in my terminology. Systemic value creation, so in the kind of a donut of Kate Raworth, is a sustainable promise on systemic value creation from the donut thinking in terms of ecologic, social, and economic lasting value creation. And purpose is the kind of frame of promise of companies, how they will long-term generate systemic value. And it goes with regeneration, because regeneration from the overshoots we are currently seeing, regeneration from the social structures we've been seeing developed, and making that in a systemic value creation promise. So purpose is the kind of natural language phrase of a promise for systemic value creation. I'm happy to discuss that with the audience. Now, how does business struggle with transformation? And I put in brackets this transformation. In transformation, understanding of transformation is a true systemic change. So systemic change, is another terminology, means you are attaching every single component of a system and its interplay to create a sustainable new system that serves long-lasting your purpose at this point in time, which is non-financial, non-exclusively financial in the future. So the point is that you have to understand this is so fundamental that there's no silver bullet. There is what you often see, no project approach to it. You must have a fundamental understanding on the system change of your company. And that's very, very specific to industry and companies. So it has something similar, but it has something specific for the company if you want to transform a company into a purpose business. I always compare that with a piece of music. So everybody knows the fundamental theory of music, like Bach's Art of the Fugue or so. So there is something understanding on how to write music. Yeah, business schools understand on how to drive transformation. And then in music, you have instruments to play. So everybody knows the drum and the violin or what have you in a big orchestra. And so this is like the tools you have in addressing individual project components of your transformation. So the similarity is like, we all know what transformation academically is. We all know what kind of instruments to play. And if you go back to music, every piece of music sounds different. So therefore, the architecture or the of transformation is something very specific to develop. And it has to be owned by the board and the CEO as an agenda. So you can't start just playing some music pieces and assume at the end you have a symphony. And so the core that is needed is an integral theory of change for your company, understanding the metrics of the future and adapting the system. And that agenda must be owned by the owners, but essentially at the operational scale and strategically by the board. And in that board, I have to say, I do assume it has to be owned by the CEO. CEOs have to be humble at this point in time because most CEOs have an average lifetime of 6 to 8 years. And please be realistic and not naive. In 6 to 8 years, nobody is going to drive a full transformation. The best you can do is initiate the right things into this piece of music and make it sticky, such that a setback after some changes will be survived and the company will go the right direction. So what are the 5 things I would say I learned about transformation, which was mainly digital transformation in the last companies I was an executive or CEO. The first is any transformation of a corporate organization has to address the why, the what, and the how in a good and aligned way. Nothing works alone. Second, as mentioned already, the C-suite in alignment with the shareholders and owners are mandatory for the success of any transformation. You will fail if you don't have that aligned. Next, number 3 is you need external agents to help accelerating your transformation. And I don't mean you need consultants to do it. What I mean is that in every transformation of industry after technological revolutions, and it will be the same right now, you need a solid way how to incubate the experience and the momentum and the newness of the entrepreneurs around, defining their business in the new world without legacy. I know this is a critical point because very often this is done wrong, because the question on why do I do this kind of cooperation framework in corporate venturing or in accelerators or what have you as a company is not linked to the agenda of your total transformation, but it's started as an island, which makes sense in many cases, not to make it too close to the core business. But what it often lacks is the theory of change of the system on how do you use these momentum of the new businesses with the new business models into your own corporate core transformation. 4 is, and I think Östergaard did that well, know your company's immune system. And don't underestimate it. Your company immune system is very strong. And there are phases in that roadmap of transformation where you need to specifically understand how your corporate immune system works to be successful in the next step-by-step transformation of your company into your piece of music. And last but not least, one of the very important parts of the transformation is transformative learning and skill building. I mean, you are offering a course here, so understanding what is so different in the world we want to unfold, and what kind of skills do we need to not only create that, but also to live in that new world, must not be underestimated. In digital, we have not by fun just sent people to become Scrum Masters or learn Agile and what have you. It's something that we didn't have. Why did we make executive trainings to talk about feedback? Yeah, well, how do you want to work in an agile environment if you have no idea what feedback is, or you're even resistant to it? So I think it's very important to understand that transformative skill building in any transformation to be successful. So 5 things I think that are major success factors for a transformation, and we do need this radical thinking about the transformation currently unfolding, which is the purpose of impact economy transformation. And radical is something that we do not really see much. Some companies have done over a long time radical transformations of their business models and their organizations, and I think we need more of it. And I'm happy you set that course to enable some scaling of that ideas on what does it require on leadership. So with that, little starting the discussion, like 20 minutes, and I'm really happy and looking forward to discussing the topics I mentioned and having questions on that from the community.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. Wow, that was so much information and so good. My mind is spinning with so many different things I'd love to dive into. But I think at its core, what I love about what you're talking about is that this purpose transformation is the reason it is so radical in the transformation is that it isn't a technique. It's the first time in forever, right? That it's not a technology. It's not the invention of a wheel or the industrial revolution. It's the purpose revolution, and that is a revolution in values and the systemic value creation of an organization. It's very complex what you've just said. But what I also love about you and your work is that you have this very high level perspective of it, but you've been in there actually setting the strategy, doing the work. And so you've got the theory, but also the theory of change, but also the practice in doing that. So what I'd love to do, and I think, I'm sure we've got people who will have lots of questions as well, but I'd love to sort of unpack it a little bit from a business from somebody who's a practitioner of this. So we've studied with our CEO study, as you know, every other year we do deep dives into businesses that are making these transitions. And we look at how did they do it? And as you said about music, each song is different, each sheet is different, but from your own experience and the process of what that actually looked like as you were sort of building something new, or as you're looking at other businesses, can you give us some practical example of what that actually would look like? If I'm a CEO, I'm sitting here watching this, listening, saying, God, this makes great sense. What do I do tomorrow? How do I get this started?
I think that that really depends on where you are, to be frank and honest. But what is required from the CEO is, first of all, clarity and passion for transformation, because it's painful. So the question, do you understand? It is not category 5 out of 6 focus areas that you're currently running in your company, but do you understand and live the importance of that? And how do you find out whether somebody does that? And that's a typical, a bit historically inherited way of doing it. So you can ask the CEO of a company on if the 100th anniversary or whatever of your company, the book is published about the last 100 years, and there is half a page about you and the 6 to 8 years you've served as a CEO. What is the thing they're going to write about you? Or what do you think they're going to write about you? It goes a little bit back to the Kobe stuff in the 80s. But so write that down. And then the question is this something where you would phrase that you've initiated or accelerated or that transformation into a purpose economy that was so relevant at that point in time to accelerate for the size of organization you're running, to make sure your company has value in the eyes of those that I just mentioned, your employees, your customers, your investors or owners, and also civil society? Have you been driven by the developments, or have you understood, people can call it Horizon 3, have you understood the new world early enough, which, by the way, is one of the key responsibilities of you if you're a CEO. So I think this is something to know. Is it clear and passionate, because it is the purpose also of the CEO in person to link to that purpose journey of the company? And have you understood and taken the purpose power of people and of your stakeholders to align it into the purpose of the company? Second, you can see on that purpose transformation, are you putting it at the core of your company? Or is it kind of a sanity check? Or are you running purpose on the periphery? And then it's not a really purpose. And let me give a few bullet points about the difference of this. So you feel and you see a lot of purpose discussions in company which are such that purpose is not very specific to the company. It's somewhat lacking the answer of being, and it's a statement without a connection to action. And you can see many companies where purpose is an add-on to the strategy. Oh yeah, we need it for employee motivation. Oh yes, definitely we want to help the environment and not to be a bad company on that. And oh yeah, there is something we want to give back to society. So this is the kind, not the systemic part, but this is the kind of second order kind of thing aligned to it. It's communications driven. So you have your CSR 7.3, your donations, foundations, associations. You don't say anything is bad about it. I just say that has nothing to do with a purpose-driven company. And you have your reports. I don't know how many people you have to compile the GI report. And so you're very, John would call it, responsible as a company, but you have not made the steps into regeneration and passing resilience. We see many of the resilient kind of things. Oh yeah, we need to have a resilient business model. This is halfway through. We have to move into regenerative models. And last but not least, you have what I've mentioned, these isolated strategic initiatives. And they are not into a hymn sheet to get the music again. And that's very important. If you put it at the core, your purpose is really compelling and clarifying the North Star, what the company stands for. And it gives you a frame for your decisions. It's also aspirational, and it's motivating all your stakeholders that assigns value to you. And it provides a clear impetus to the company action. So there is the question, what do we decide today in these uncertain times? Where do we have a North Star for our actions and a clarity on what we do and what we don't do? And in that kind of world, in insecurity, the times when we have secure boundary conditions is gone. I mean, we can see it all around us. So, and therefore, this purpose can become and has to become a North Star in this. And it's clearly lifetime value creation that in a systemic way that has to be the core of your strategy. And the strategic programs aren't they integrated into one hymn sheet? Do you understand why you do ones after another and how it plays together? And why are you starting this entrepreneurship accelerator? Or is it running in isolation? Is it just something that, oh yeah, we saw this is something important, let's do this, and then let's communicate this, but let's not make it a part of the transformation of the company's core. You can really see in the kind of a checklist, is it a company that is really on the right way to purpose economy, purpose-driven company, or is it something that is more reactive in seeing something that you have to comply to? And that's a difference. And so the CEO makes the difference, and the board makes the difference, and the backing of the shareholders and owners make the difference, whether they understand there is an unfolding of a fundamental new economy, and the transformation has to be initiated now, because exponential has something ugly in it. If you are reacting linear to an exponential change, you fall behind exponentially at a certain point in time.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And we have a purpose maturity model that we've been working on for years as part of our CEO study, and exactly how you've sort of beautifully described. We look at companies that are either at the very beginning, they're just good company, they're just law-abiding citizens paying their taxes, and we think of them as just at the very, they're just they're not even really on the journey. Then they move into kind of a reactive area, and that's where they start to make some changes, but they do it as a reaction to potential legislation, etc. Then they move it into more of a marketing and communication. So they're moving around moving up the maturity in embedding it. So that's where they put it, their brands and their products become more sustainable. They have, social purpose attached, but it's still not embedded completely. And when it becomes where it's at that exponential area is when they've deeply embedded it in the organization, that the whole organization changes, right? It completely, we look at Ørsted, who used to be Dong Energy, and how they essentially took that old organization and they scaled it down while they were building the other one. Just as you've described it, it started very small, and they started to upskill the other one. So then by the end of it, it completely flipped. But the way you've described it is just beautiful, and I really appreciate that. I know we have some questions in the chat. Nicole, maybe I'll hand it over to you.
Sure.
Can I add one thing that I like to wrap off the whole thing, because the word regenerative has been framed. I think it has been framed by John actually quite some time ago, and it's now very much out there. What I currently perceive in the kind of crisis we are in total, also from the business perspective, of course, I mean, it's a very, very vulnerable time, is that a lot of energy goes into the resilience mode. So coming from the responsible part, John has the 3 R's, the responsible part, and then the resilient part, and then the regenerative part. And you can see that there's a lot of questions going out. How can we become more resilient against what's happening out there? And this is all valid, and it's all understood from the perspective that you want to be resilient. But as we speak, this is still behind the curve, because what we need is the 100-odd trillion assets, financial assets, and the 1.5 billion private sector employees globally with the assets to bring them together into not just resilient, but regenerative models of business. And that's something, if you want to move, even if you want to move a 10,000 people company, how tough to move that into becoming regenerative. And thereby the only way of surviving midterm and getting value assigned by your stakeholders will be you do this transformation into regeneration. If you don't work on the tectonic plates of that kind of system, you will have the volcanoes by disruption. So the responsibility is get on your feet and start to think about your regenerative business models and start initiating the transformation.
I love that.
Yeah, just brilliant. I'm appreciating so much of the language that you're using, Karsten, and I've really been listening from a place of noticing the patterns and the conditions that you're describing as you describe this revolution and the change. And it sounds like there's such a cultural revolution happening. We're talking about a revolution of values internally inside of the company, but then at the same time, this larger context and how we connect to that through our purpose is also evolving. We're moving from more collaborative partnerships that are not limited to the boundaries and the silos of our organizations. We're not doing things in isolation as much. We're looking at the interconnectivity of how our role as an organization connects to the larger system as well. So we're playing across many, many different scales here. And there's a question that came through the chat because I so appreciated how you described not only some of the transformation qualities that are happening, right? Like the shifts that we can be noticing and attuning ourselves to, but then you also named some of the moves that a cultural change agent or a leader inside of an organization could be prioritizing, like getting buy-in from the C-suite and the board as just one example. So curious if there are other key conditions that you've noticed are really worthwhile investing in the energy now, being proactive as a change agent to curate the right conditions for this type of transformation to happen effectively and efficiently. And particularly if someone or their organization has not yet defined their purpose, how might they go about upgrading or evolving that, or even defining it in the first place so that they can proactively be a part of this transformation?
Yeah, let me start with one of the very interesting, looks like a minor comment on a bigger topic. You said the buy-in of the board. If you just have the buy-in of the board, you are maximum halfway through. I've seen many initiatives where I said, oh yeah, we've started a program on it. We now have a department on it, and that is backed by the board. Sorry, I have to drop that ball. Wait a minute. So yeah, we have started a program. We have even a department on it. Maybe we have a transformation manager or so, and the board backs our program. And our experience is, if it is not owned by the board, if it's just backed by the board, you already have the first discount on the rate of success that you can have. My number one. So make sure you expose and you get clarity about, is that number 6, as I say, of one of the other 6 kind of priorities strategically we have, or is it understood that it is a fundamental thing to have to become a company that has value in a not too short time to come, because the conditions around us are changing dramatically over time. And I don't think I have to cite any of the obvious kind of things we are currently observing all around us. The second is interesting. The concept of purpose is something to understand, maybe initially on the personal side. I had no idea about my own purpose before I turned 52. I just did things. I experienced things. I had clips in my life. I had reactions to that. But did I ever dive into the question on why am I here? What connects my dots? How do I behave how I behave? What is driving me? What inspires me? What are my core values? And I think a company that wants to be purpose-driven has to enable, offer, and drive with all people in the organization to understand that concept on a personal and organizational level. So I think understanding this is something very specific for this transformation. It has to do with some of the skills and attitudes and so on, but it has also to do with the culture. How do you live that purpose organization? What kind of behaviors do you stimulate? Are people encouraged to design, to imagine the future and connect to them and try to how to bring that into the momentum of the company, which is different from some of these top-down and other organizational things we are currently having. So I think important is really maybe at the beginning to people understand that thing is not an artificial thing like a purpose, but it's something that is so fundamental that people should understand it and then see how people can contribute. It might actually be that people don't want to contribute to companies. That happens also in other settings. But make sure this is the momentum, the collective momentum of a joint purpose that motivates passion, that creates momentum. I think, as you mentioned, the cultural background is one of the core themes to establish. And it's very different in learning, also very different in learning concepts. I'm in discussion with many young people who think with the economy they can change the world. And then they, after 6 weeks of getting into it, they say, no, this is not what I wanted to learn. Because we still have 19th century education systems. I mean, you are from the background. So we tell people who say, we want to change the world, giving our passion to a world we want to create, and of course want to learn how to do this. And what we confront them with, let me be a bit black and white, is to say, oh yeah, that's a great idea that you shape the world. You are young and it's your future. But before we talk to you, please learn our language. So what we are doing in economic studies, and maybe Harvard is not different to that, others are not, is really that education system that, let me give you the narratives before you start free thinking. And that's not going to work with this kind of needs for energy and passion, so the non-tangible assets of people next to the financial assets to create the world we need. We need to encourage people to create a world and imagine a world that they believe in, and equip them with knowledge on collectively experience on how they can bring that to action. So I think this is complete maybe I'm a little bit black and white or off track here, but I think this is another very, very fundamental development. I think we need to be more radical on that, and also your education systems, or our education systems, or the university education systems, I think are potentially in some areas not embedding radical enough thinking here, but are like companies have become CSR driving CSR programs next to their core business. That's also some of the university systems and MBA systems are on the same scale. They are creating sustainability MBAs, which just explains a new language without questioning the narratives of classical economics. That's a bit academic, but I tell you one of them that everybody works on. It's like, I'm a physicist, as I said, it's like Newton mechanics in economy. So did you ever think about whether trade-off is a great thing in a decision-making? It's so natural that you have these kind of, in management and everywhere, you have this kind of trade-off thing. So there's one curve going this, one curve going that, and then there is an optimum in the middle. This is so deeply embedded that you don't even ask it. You believe it. The world is full of trade-offs. And that's all linear system thinking that is not suitable to understand the world that we have to create with a more systemic understanding. Maybe this was too academic, but I think it's important to understand that enabling people to dare to imagine futures, connect to them with passion, and then help to equip people with the means to come through action to shape that world we need. I think that's very essential as an underlying, as I said, build the skills, transformative education that you also have to bring into companies.
I love that. So good. I love this point about the board as well, and I'd like to circle back to that. But I know we've got a question in the chat. Nicole, did we already cover that question?
We've touched on it a bit, but there's a curiosity around if you're walking through the journey of systemic transformation within a startup ecosystem specifically, and maybe you're defining purpose from the beginning, how might you shift a whole industry or go about that transformation journey?
We've seen in the last transformation, let's step a little back and go to 60,000 feet. In the last transformation, we have seen some non-legacy pure play entrepreneurs understanding the new economy, which is the digital economy. And well, we see how the biggest ones of them got. I don't want to value how this has to be seen, but we've seen that with the right scaling in the right environment, entrepreneurs with a systemic mindset, with a systemic purpose in mind at creation and their contribution to social, ecological, and financial sustainable businesses, that they are flourishing in the new economy. And I think we're going to see the same thing in that purpose/impact entrepreneurship, that we will see as that economy and the value perception unfolds exponentially, that we will see the demand for the offering in terms of a systemic value creation. We're going to see that roaring as we go on. And there are amazing, amazing entrepreneurs out there, and I'm meeting some of them in the groups that you've been mentioning. Whenever I come back from a mentorship event or whatever, and you see these people designing that kind of future, be it in the more social part or in the impact part or in the scale-ups you can see, you get positive. I can understand John with the Green Swans hypothesis to say, if we only understand what we can do, if we know why and how we want to do it, it's amazing. So if you can inhale that kind of experience into the transformation journey of your company in a way that is better than we did it mostly in the digital transformation, then I think there is a lot of hope that we can also create the momentum moving the corporates faster. There are people who are skeptical about it, and I understand that, looking to the realities as we are, and the kind of things that are currently done to somewhat stabilize the system somewhat, and by also capturing some of the terminology, actually. Quite interesting if we can dive into that a bit. The next thing, what are the kind of very clever ways of trying to not too fast accelerate the transformation? So heading into more the disaster mode into change later on. If you embed that kind of entrepreneurship into your agenda, so it's maybe the drum of your music, then You have to understand how that plays with the rest of the organization. It can, I do believe, it can be a good facilitator and catalyst if understood as part of the piece of music and the hymn sheet written by the board and the ownership.
I love that. So good. You said there's so many things. We could just talk to you for for the whole day. You said something early on, two things actually. One was about know your company's immune system. Can you unpack what you mean by that? Because I think that's critical to all of this.
Well, there is you can say go back to the innovator's dilemma. I mean, there is a company running successful outside crisis where the question on the new thing that you establish in the company is why the hell do we do this? This is only costing money. In the first crisis where you tend to cut everything, and then this new thing is questioned by, oh my God, we have spent so much money on it, and where's the return yet? So the kind of pressure to stay with the old, I mean, everybody knows that, and it has to do with the mindset of transformation. Is it something that is running on the sideline, or even if it is somehow protected and is part of the vision of the CEO that I mentioned before, still there's a lot of pressure that the transformation people have to understand where it comes from, and also have to sort it into this kind of immune system reaction, because there's not a necessary drive for change initially, and the kind of how to resist it and how to essentially stay with the old or augment it, which is halfway through. I mean, something like, oh yeah, we can augment our business with some of the new things, but we don't want to really see how it is changing fundamentally. The mechanisms there, I think, are known. I mean, the kind of questions on decisions, the kind of why do we do this, and that's a lot about communication, of course, yeah. But there's also a lot of making people feel it works. And looking to the experiences of the digital arena, I mean, this kind of transformation from a transactional, for example, to a lifetime value concept is extremely radical. In the transactional world where we sell products and we fix products and we somehow that, to no, we think about value we create for our customers over lifetime, and how do we know our customers directly or intermediary, or what is the kind of understanding of the customer value you create over lifetime and not just in the transaction. This is something pretty radical. And it has to go back to the decision points where you say, yeah, this project I'm going to do, and that project I don't do. And it's the changing metrics. And so typically I have to say that with myself, introducing that kind of metric early enough, this metric is not changing your company, but introducing it too late enables your immune system to argue decisions where you haven't the full transparency about the consequence of that new metric in your decision making derived from the future of the business model you want to do. You typically do this too late, I have to say. I did that too late. So I should have done that early in the transformations I was in. So that enables a too long staying on the old without being too early challenged for the new.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And I remember we had this discussion with Franz van Houten about Philips, when they did this transformation with Philips. And they moved into a circular model, or they were trying to move into the circular model, and how amazingly that changed their relationship with their customers, that lifetime value with the customers, but also just recognizing so many things within the system that was kind of the immune system that you're talking about. So they were incenting their salespeople still needed to make sales numbers, but the sales numbers, they were, instead of selling the equipment, they were basically leasing the equipment and interacting. And so, and getting the equipment returned, this whole circular model, just thinking through each of those components to address the possible immune system that you've really beautifully talked about. But at the end of the day, they went from having, a very high turnover of customers because they were, to a whole different relationship where they had very deep knowledge of what they wanted, and it was much more of a collaboration with their customers at that point. So really, but that transformation takes time, and everybody needs to be on the journey, including the customers, right?
Yep. And as I said, it's a journey over time. The time constant is on average longer than a CEO lifetime.
Yeah, that's another thing, right? So being incented to this idea about what is that half of page that people will in this journal will say about you and your time here at the to have that perspective, I think, is beautiful, because you will be doing things that are courageous and bold and will outlive your tenure. So it's really, really powerful. Well, I know we are running close to time here. Nicole,
Yeah, I did want to throw in another question for you here, Karsten, before we maybe bring the conversation to an end. And it's also around this change immunity piece, because we've talked about how attuning to what those moments of resistance or tension, discovering what those might be and proactively addressing it. I think the move to more long-term thinking and the challenges of succession planning, in particular, when it comes to the typical lifetime that a CEO is in that seat, that turns up as a major point of tension and challenge. And we're hearing a lot about that in conversations that we're having. But the other big challenge or objection even to change in this change immunity response that the collective system that is our culture or that is our team, the other response that can come up often is, no, I'm too burnt out. I have no space on my plate. And so we're noticing that particularly in cultures of overwork, where that obsessive productivity is just always on, we don't always have the space to truly reflect on the transformation and to question these big aspects of why are we doing this? Can we fundamentally question our role as a company in society and what our purpose is? And so if we don't have that space, we may be stuck in this reactivity and in this survival mode. So I'm curious, you talked about regeneration. If we're building regenerative companies that are part of these broader ecosystems, how might we also create regenerative systems within ourselves and within our teams so that we have the space to ask these bold questions and transform?
Yeah, I think there is, this is a core question of leadership and of how you encourage and give freedom to this. And I know this is this kind of getting busy with and covered with a short-term thing is something very popular and very, very common also. And it has a lot to do with micromanagement. Let me be a little black and white. That can cover a lot of capacity in the whole organization. The word of trust organization is maybe one of the most misused in organizations, because trust is required essentially when you, by principle, cannot control. Anything you can control, you don't need to trust. And think about it. How is your organization working? On how many levels are you having check and balances and kind of making the organization more people-centric requires to have much more trust in the people, which is tough. It's a transformation itself in many companies who don't think you are involved and informed at every moment of everything in your organization. At least that's what you want to do. If you're not knowing everything in the moment, if you just know there are people taking care about it, that you don't control and you trust it's going to do right, this sounds a bit funny, but it's, I think, one of the major challenges we still have in organizational setups in corporates. So I think that mindset shift of how people are bringing their energy, passion into the total, and the question on how can you build on that passion when you create them, is something that is a power that hasn't been unlocked in many, many organizations. And that's the core thing. You have to unlock this by trust. So assuming indeed everybody is the best on his or her job. And that's something that is hard to sustain in many of leadership we have today, but with all the programs we are running. And with that, I would say being more people-centric in your organization and not so functional on that is one of the unlocking powers that you can have in your organization.
Yeah, really, really good. It's just, I love the idea of trust. And it's not only internally, right? So a lot of times, particularly small businesses who are, we as Leaders on Purpose are a small business, and we rely a lot on partners, and we have to build that trust and assume that they will be doing, that they're the very best partner for this particular area.
Think about what I said, Krista. Is so simple. The fundamental concept of trust relies on the fact of not being able, in principle, to control it. And if you make that a kind of a line of, are you a trusted organization, then the question is, how many structures that you in principle cannot control but rely on are you tolerating and stimulating? And that's for me something that is important to understand. And if you hold your checklist against how you're running an organization, the question is, how much in the space of your organization is this happening, to what degree?
Yeah. So maybe as one last question, what advice, I think it's always just really, we've talked about, somebody just getting on the journey, but just quick advice around the 5 points that you had, what advice would you give to someone who has just stepped in? So there's a lot of turnover. We just talked about how quickly people are moving out of these offices. They're in their first 100 days. What advice do you give for the CEO or the leader in their first 100 days to actually start this process?
I think it's key to develop a concise and clear future picture on, people would call it Horizon 3. So not where are we today and what are we going to do tomorrow with the technology and what's happening here, but think from what is your right to exist in a world that is unfolding and which has a different value metric assigned to you by everything. So number one, are you clear, and is your colleagues on the C-suite clear, and do you win your owners, investors, shareholders? Do you win them for that picture? I was amazed by a talk of the CEO of Nestlé on his journey, who said to an amazing point that one of the core things on his journey from becoming an oil drilling, oil processing company to what they are today is understanding that the structure of their public listed shareholders will likely not completely follow that strategy. I found it amazing because I talked to many people who say, yeah, but my shareholders are determining, can I change my shareholding structure? And he said, of course you can, in the right timing. There is enough money out there, although I have to be honest, I think the kind of numbers we currently see for truly impact-driven investments is over-exaggerated. But there is enough money who's looking for the right investments that are serious on that transformation. And I think he did that. From what he explained in a chat we had with him, is that was a very essential step to say, we might not be your company as shareholders for the future, but there are enough outside there that carry a true impact, a true transformative company. So think about that when you design, how do you deal with your owners and how do you deal with your colleagues? If you're not aligned and you don't have a common story, that will not work over time.
That is bold. I love that. If you're not, we may not be the company that the people that are in, again, that's that kind of that immunity system, right? It's the old guard. We may not be the company that you want to, to invest in, but this is the future. And the idea that really having an understanding of what right is it that you have to exist in the world that we are becoming, and really deeply considering that as you move forward in thinking about your strategy for the company. It's brilliant.
Yep.
Thank you so much. This has been such a great discussion, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thanks. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yes.
We loved it.
Yes.
Wonderful.
And such a wonderful taster in a way of what's to come. We're holding more of these fireside chat conversations. And so for those who joined live today or are catching the replay, keep an eye out for more conversations like this to come. And a lot of the topics that we touched on here, from alignment to developing a shared story to sequencing how you might navigate the journey of a transformation like this. We are putting this together in a 6-week accelerator course where we're bringing together expertise like what you heard here today with Karsten, and we're going to be walking people through a very hands-on experience in that 6-week accelerator program. So if that's something you're interested in learning more about, I'll go ahead and drop the link in the chat so that you can learn more about that program and get your application in for our October cohort, which is the next one that we have coming up. So yeah, thank you so much for opening this conversation. As Krista said, we could talk to you all day. This is just the beginning of a really important global conversation that we are collectively having.
It was a pleasure to contribute, and good luck to the program.
Thank you.
You'll be back if we have anything to say about it. Thank you so much, Karsten.
Thank you. Bye-bye to everybody. Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye, everyone.